So our third speaker in the afternoon on musicals is Ash Collard, an orchestrator, composer, musical director, and researcher based in Birmingham, UK, with interests in inclusivity and diversity in musical theatre. He composed the music for the film Home Safe in 2022 and has orchestrated music for various groups, including the Fantasies Come True, in a concert at the Other Palace, London, which platformed and celebrated the growing body of LGBTQ plus representation within musical theater. He is currently a PhD candidate at the University of Wolverhampton. His thesis, titled Trans Performance Framework, Barriers and Benefits in the Inclusion of Trans Masculine Performers in Professional Musical Theatre in the UK, explores the ways in which the inclusion of trans performers on the musical stage, theater stage, benefits both trans and cis people across the industry. So please welcome Ash, who's going to speak today on this song's Another Reason I Can See Two Sides, Another Thing I Can See Two Sides To, Parody, Stereotype, and Jewish Representation in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend.
Crazy Ex-Girlfriend is created by these two brilliant ladies here. A musical comedy series by Rachel Bloom and Elaine Brush McKenna. It follows Rebecca Bunch in her pursuit of love and happiness. Central to this show are all the musical numbers. There are about 3 or 4 in every episode. And it went for 4 seasons, so there's a lot of musical numbers out there. They function as Rebecca's internal coping and processing mechanism, bringing the audience into her world, and allowing her to narrate her experiences through her love and the conventions of musical theatre. They frequently position her as the romantic ingenue of a sort of classic golden age musical, even when the show is systemically dismantling that fantasy in front of her. The musical numbers throughout are all reflective of various existing musical styles. Some are parodies of really specific songs that you listen to them and you go, oh, that sounds exactly like that one. While others are more broad intertextual references to particular genres, spanning from Gilbert and Sullivan, as we've just heard about, and early Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals, to more contemporary pop styles of Beyonce, Ed Sheeran, the classic big artists, and pretty much every other genre in between. And this stylistic fluidity enables the show to align musical form with its narrative function, making the genre of the song and each individual song a part of the storytelling tools. Throughout the show, it makes intertextual references which direct the audience to view the show through the lens of past texts, which is what Gray describes as a system that calls for the viewer to use previously seen texts to make sense of the one at hand. Therefore, to be decoded, this inherent intertextuality requires an audience to know and recognize the references that are being made. Similarly, Gibson emphasizes how performance relies on social and cultural memory, on the ability of an audience to make connections between the present and the past. In this sense, perceptions of a Crazy Ex-Girlfriend depend on varying degrees of audience recognition. Viewers don't necessarily need to recognize every single reference or even be able to specifically identify what it's referring to, but this recognition enriches the audience interpretation and produces a sense of inclusion. Throughout this paper, I'll argue about that Crazy Ex-Girlfriend mobilizes parody and intertextuality to construct an insider-outsider dynamic that is central to its exploration of, in this case, I'm discussing Jewish identity, but it could be applied to various things throughout the show. I will examine how the show invites specific audience groups with insider knowledge whilst retaining broader audiences by diversifying its reference points. Jewishness in the series is articulated through this tension between a recognition and an opacity, or between belonging and inclusion, Furthermore, this duality mirrors how Rebecca experiences her own Judaism in the show. The paper will explore 2 key case studies. I'll touch on a third a little bit as well at the end. For reference, I thought this was a 15-minute paper, so I really cut it down. So I'll be ducking and diving in between a few things. 2 key case studies from the show where Rebecca's Jewish identity is established in relation to her Jewish female elders, notably her mother and her rabbi. I'll examine Where's the Bathroom, which is sung by Naomi, Rebecca's mother, and Remember That We Suffered, sung by the rabbi, as well as a few scenes surrounding them. Finally, I'll consider a contrasting example in the song, and I apologize if this terminology offends anyone, in the song Jack Battle, which Rebecca sings with her nemesis, Audra. So first, a consideration of how intertextuality and parody function in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. How does this contribute to the insider-outsider dynamic? Well, intertextual references within the show involve the repetition of elements of the existing texts. Parody extends this by providing a commentary. So as Hutcheon defines, parody is repetition with critical distance. Through recreating notable features of a text and distorting them, a parody's commentary is formed. Gibson describes these as hyper-performances to create parody, meaning they conform to what an audience thinks such references should sound like, rather than what they actually sound like. For example, in Crazy Ex-Girlfriends, there's songs such as Friendtopia, which is the one on the left there, and I'm Not Sad, You're Sad, which is the one on the right. Both of these songs are performed in quasi-British accents. They're very exaggerated, but recognizable versions of the accents heard in the songs they're referencing. So Friendtopia on the left is referencing sort of 2000s, early 2000s, late 90s British girl groups. It's very much Spice Girls is what that song's doing. And I'm Not Sad, You're Sad is more of the early 2000s British girl rappers. There's a big rise of that in the 2000s. And the performers replicate those accents in very exaggerated ways. To me, certainly, as a Brit, they don't sound like accurate British accents, but they sound perfectly clear that they're supposed to be British accents, and I can understand it's an exaggerated form. Beyond the specific musical references, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend makes use of conforming and subverting genre tropes to establish its perspective and audience expectations. At first glance, it appears to follow a very typical romantic comedy narrative of centering on the highs and lows of the lead, Rebecca's romantic pursuits. However, this is not followed through to a typical conclusion. She doesn't, sorry for any spoilers as well, she doesn't fall in love and live happily ever after with the man she's chasing in the first episode. Instead, it follows her journey in herself and her own reflections. Despite building towards a decision between her 3 love interests by the end of season 4, she chooses to pursue her own well-being and her own interests. And now, reducing rom-coms to this very simplistic idea that they all lead to this romantic gesture is very simplistic, I know. But, of course, going into rom-com films, it's usually what we're expecting. However, intertextual references rely on these exaggerated performances to make it easier for the audience to identify. If they were doing perfect British accents in this song, it would kind of be unremarkable. But the fact that they're doing these exaggerated ones make it stand out more. It's very similar to if you see a caricature drawing. They're really exaggerated pictures, but really recognizable. The most notable features of a person's face are exaggerated in a way that make them really unrealistic and yet make it even easier for them to be identified and even more recognizable to the viewer. And that's what Crazy Ex-Girlfriend is doing in these songs. The most important consideration when I'm discussing intertextuality is the audience. Regardless of what the writer's intentions are when they're making intertextual references, the impact they have is reliant on the audience's reception of them. Indeed, all performance is reliant on social and cultural memory of their audience, as well as their ability to identify connections between the work and its predecessors. However, intertextuality relies on the audience's specific pre-existing knowledge of the texts that are being referenced. This creates a layered audience with each reference, those who get the reference, the insiders, and those who don't, the outsiders. Crucially, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend does not try to resolve this divide. Rather, it foregrounds it. Recognition produces a sense of belonging, whilst moments of opacity for the audience, through untranslated references and culturally specific jokes, mark the limits of that belonging. This is not to say that the work cannot be enjoyed without the knowledge, but it adds a layer of understanding and satisfaction when these references are acknowledged and identified by the audience. The ability to identify the references being made allows an audience member to feel included. They're in the know, they're in the inside. Which subgroups make up the insider group will vary depending on the audience, the genres the show that sits in, and the text it's referencing. So another TV musical that makes use of parody is Schmigadoon. By the title, it's parodying Brigadoon, and it makes use of a lot of those early musical theatre references throughout its first series. As such, it primarily attracts a sort of classic musical theatre audience. I don't know many people who've watched it who don't already love musical theatre. And that means that whilst there's still room for that discussion and community around debating what things are referencing, it's actually pretty clear-cut to most of the audience of Schmigadoon, for example, what it's referencing. Most of the audience are likely to pick up on the same reference points. Contrasting this, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend is able to attract audiences who enjoy the romantic comedy genre, musical theatre, and a plethora of others, really. Additionally, the variety of musical styles referenced in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend means the audiences are not only likely to hear the music that they enjoy, but they're also unlikely to pick up every reference that's made. There are tons of Spotify playlists and Reddit threads about which song each one is referencing. And it's a highly debated topic amongst the fan group of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. So, moving on to my first example. Season 1, episode 8, opens with a stylized black and white prologue in Yiddish, which is not pictured, depicting Rebecca's ancestors on a ship from Europe to America, 1901. The Yiddish is translated on screen with English subtitles, yet, as Miller notes, contains a few untranslated euphemisms. This sequence immediately establishes an insider register through its use of Yiddish, and these cultural reference points signaling a specifically Jewish history that may not be fully legible to all viewers. At the same time, the visual stylization renders the scene very accessible to outsider audiences as a pastiche. Most people will have seen some film, most people will have read about the history and understand what the scene is referencing. Later in the episode, we get our musical number that I'm looking at and that is pictured, Where's the Bathroom? This sees Naomi, played by Tova Feldscher, visiting her daughter, Rebecca, after she has left her job as a successful New York lawyer and moved to Los Angeles, which she is very disapproving of, apologies to anyone in the room, in order to pursue her childhood crush, Josh. And I love this song primarily because have you ever met someone and then you've met their parent, their mother, at a later date and suddenly they've clicked and they make sense? That is what this song does. We've seen Rebecca for 7 episodes and then we get this song and suddenly she makes sense through her mother. It embodies the Jewish mother trope that has been talked about a lot across academia and features a lot in a lot of Jewish media. This stereotype Myers describes as one in which she inserts herself into moments that do not necessarily concern her and is therefore seen as meddling. But in doing so, also sometimes puts herself in situations that make her seem like she is the reason the challenging thing happened instead of the solution. Certainly, this is how Naomi is presented by Rebecca in Where's the Bathroom and throughout the episode. I'm going to play you a bit of it now.
Where's the bathroom? Where's the bathroom? I need to use the bathroom. Tell me that you have a bathroom in this hovel you call home. I don't know which was bumpy, or the plane ride, or the taxi. All these freeways are a nightmare. And where's my purse? I need my coat. By the way, you're looking healthy, and by healthy, I mean chunky. I don't mean that as an insult. I'm just stating it as fact. I see your eczema is back. Are you using the lotion that I sent you? If you're not gonna use it, I'll return it to the store. God, I give you everything, and still you just want more.
Oh, there we go. I'll pause it there. I could listen to the whole I could listen to the whole song multiple times over. The features in this song of the Jewish mother trope are generalized enough that there is a limited insider-outsider divide. Most people I know would recognize some element of one of their parents in that character, Jewish or not. The song only uses one Yiddish term, which I use sporadically throughout the show. The song only uses one Yiddish term, goyish, that is well enough known by most non-Jewish audiences to understand, and a brief enough reference that actually, if you didn't understand it, you're not going to be dwelling on it. Furthermore, there are outsider musical reference points throughout. The use of the fast, incessant vocals that we've heard there are very referential to the Gilbert and Sullivan operetta and early musical theatre patter songs that any musical theatre audiences would very quickly recognise. There is also a use of, and let me see if I should have written down the exact time. There we go.
You call that a bathroom?
So there's the reference to the Jaws theme there, that little second movement. And again, anyone who's a fan of Jaws will instantly recognize that and go, danger is coming. And the danger is her mother. So there's enough reference points there that actually the outsider isn't going to feel too far outside. Whilst Naomi is both a culturally specific figure for Jewish audiences, she's also broadly recognizable as an overbearing mother. And including elements such as the Jaws theme emphasize this. We return to Naomi in season 10. She's not in the show a terrible amount, but she does return. In season 2, episode 10, this dynamic is deepened, placing itself directly in a specific cultural setting. It was a terrible picture of them, but it was the one I could find from this song. It's very insulting to have that, I feel. In this episode, Rebecca and her now boyfriend Josh, that she was chasing at the start, visit New York to attend her cousin's bar mitzvah. Rebecca hopes to show him that her misery that she's been experiencing throughout these 2 seasons is inherent to Jewish people. Yet what emerges is the dichotomy of joy in pain through the song Remember That We Suffered. The joy that everyone, including her non-Jewish boyfriend, share only makes her feel more miserable and excluded. As soon as they arrive in New York, the writers use Rebecca and Naomi's dialogue to create Jewish reference points. While at first the scene depicted them arguing, Naomi talks about her cousin's Torah portion for the bar mitzvah. And she says, do you know what Torah portion they gave Skylar? The one with menstruation and the lepers. And the scene turns. Suddenly, they're on the same side again. They're united in laughter, whilst Josh, who had been the sort of trying to draw them together, is suddenly on the outside, faking a laughter, clearly not understanding their conversation. whilst this portion of dialogue is primarily to be understood by the insider, Josh functions as the outsider on screen. He's an outsider surrogate for the audience, and his confusion at the culturally specific conversation legitimizes any potential lack of understanding audience members may have. By the next day, Josh has clearly bonded with Naomi and talks about how she taught me how to make challah French toast, which she corrects his pronunciation of to challah, but in a very light-hearted manner that makes his confusion again once okay. The on-screen outsider has now moved from Josh to Rebecca. Josh's joyful acceptance of his immersion into this Jewish culture, without necessarily understanding it all, just encourages the audience to do the same. And again, I'm going to play some of my next music.
Now it's time to celebrate. Grab a drink and fix a plate. But before you feel too great, remember that we suffered. Nights like these are filled with glee. Noshing, dancing, singing, but we sing in a minor key to remember that we suffered. Being happy is selfish. Remember that we suffered. You have no idea what pain is. Remember that we suffered. Hey! I mean, would it be such a crime for the Beastie Boys or Haim to mention in their songs one time, remember that we suffered? I don't want to bring up the Holocaust. I know the Holocaust, but the Holocaust was a really big deal. Remember that we suffered. This DJ is terrific. Remember that we suffered.
My grandma's a survivor.
Remember that she suffered.
Again, I could listen to that on repeat. This is completely off topic, but that was in my Spotify top playlist at the end of one year because I just listened to it on repeat. So the musical number, Remember That We Suffered, is sung primarily by Rabbi Shari, played by Patti LuPone, and it encapsulates the paradox within Jewish identity of the coexistence of joy and suffering. Rebecca's insistence before this that Jewishness is inherently miserable is undercut by the visible joy of the community surrounding her, exposing her alienation as a personal projection rather than a cultural truth. This again emphasizes the shift in the on-screen insider-outsider divide from the earlier episode. Josh becomes integrated, as you could see in there. He was happily getting involved in the dance, not knowing what's happening, but enjoying it, whilst Rebecca positions herself as an outsider to her own culture. Musically, as you heard, the song draws on klezmer traditions with sonic, lyrical, and visual references to minor keys, communal dance, wordless vocals. And here, I argue the insider-outsider divide is even more clear. For insiders, the understanding comes from a cultural recognition of attending Jewish events, and the humor lies in the accuracy, yet the exaggeration, as with the caricature before. For outsiders, the song is not difficult to understand without being ingrained in Jewish culture. The references are widely recognizable, discussion of the Holocaust is very well known, and contemporary figures such as the Beastie Boys, Haim, Barbra Streisand, and Steven Spielberg are all very well known. Additionally, I don't think it's a coincidence that Rabbi Shari is portrayed by famous musical theatre actress Patti LuPone. She's not Jewish. She has played quite a few Jews, but she is not herself. But it provides another in for the outsider. Any musical theatre, non-Jewish musical theatre watchers instantly know that is Patti LuPone and are very excited by it. But it's slightly more of a clear divide between the insider and outsider. My next example is... I'm going to play it again at one point. My next example exaggerates this further. I want to touch on one final quick contrasting example. Going back to season 1, episode 13, we see a legal battle between Rebecca and her New York nemesis, Audra Levine. Together, they perform a rap battle titled Jap Battle, and here's some of that now.
This is real deep beef from way back in the past. Deeper than I'll put a foot up in the crack of your ass. Come on, let's do this. Your little pals can witness how vicious this Westchester alpha bitch is. I'm straight up malicious, a verbal curb stomper. Since we were toddlers, I've studied every chink in your armor. And between your folks' divorce and that haircut on you, I'm really not sure which one's the bigger Shonda.
That means disgrace. I'm translating for the goys. Our lifelines have been parallel like corduroys, but now we'll see whose bars will prevail in this beef up too hard as nails she brews from Scarsdale.
We've got a conflict of interest.
I'm about to give Levine the business.
Spitting venomous hate.
Penetrating her defenses. It's a jab battle.
A what? A Jewish American princess.
Rap battle.
Autism.
Spitting mad flow. Too bad, yo, oh. Snap, it's a jab battle rap.
Look.
Or I will say, almost all the songs from this show are as silly as these. They're brilliant. It's well worth a watch if you haven't seen it. Once again, the on-screen outsiders create the in for the audience outsiders. So both lawyers have their backup, their troupe for this rap battle. And this is an in itself. For anyone who is a fan of rap and rap battles, the hype crew are always there. And the three behind, let me see if I can just get it there. Those three behind Rebecca are all main characters in the show. Two on the two either side of her work at her law firm, and the one on the right is Josh. We know as an audience they are not Jewish. And so Rebecca translating for these non-Jewish characters, give a non-Jewish audience the understanding that they need. Jumping back a little bit, because I missed a bit. Audience members who are familiar with rap battles, it conforms to those conventions of the genre. In particular, the diss track nature of the lyrics, witty wordplay, and shifting rhyme scheme. The clever lyricism through this, I don't know if sorry. I'm going to say this bit because I can't find it in here. So there is a line in the song which is, Sheket bavaka, shut the fuck up. Again, apologies for the language. But it takes the sha from the Hebrew phrase and the English word shut and amalgamates them. This sort of lyrical play is very in line with the rap battle style. And again, any audience members will be instantly familiar with it. It keeps the Jewish audience as the insider with the use of Hebrew phrases, with the use of Yiddish throughout, but the translation allows the outsider to still understand. Additionally, it closely parodies the cabinet battles from Hamilton. The bridge of this song in particular, the orchestration really changes to this harpsichord sound, but is very in line with Hamilton. So again, for Crazy Ex-Girlfriend's large musical theatre audience, it creates a broad in for many of its audience members. So, in sum, the insider-outsider dynamic is foundational to Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Rebecca's narrative is defined by her persistent sense of not belonging, be it geographically, romantically, or culturally. The musical numbers, as expressions of her internal world, invite the audience into her mind, and parody and intertextuality become the mechanisms through which this is articulated. The musical numbers create shifting positions of recognition and exclusion, ensuring that no audience member remains fully outside. And this could be applied to many of the things in the show. You could pick musical theatre as the insider-outsider divide and look at it through that lens. There's a lot of avenues to explore in this. In this sense, the insider-outsider divide in parody is not a problem to be resolved, nor does Crazy Ex-Girlfriend try to, but a tool for creativity and audience relationship. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you so much, Ash, for this. This is really great I love the way you're looking at it with intertextuality. I really think that the depth of the insidery of this is really what gives it its really uniqueness at this time. And I want to share with you a story that we can call a quintessential LA story. One Sukkot, I went to a friend of mine who's a comic or writing comic. There were a bunch of people there. He introduced me to this guy in Sukkot who said he's a comedy writer. I said, what kind of things do you write for? He goes, well, I write things, some things on TV. What have you done? And he said, I've written lyrics for Crazy Ex-Girl. And I said, oh, what songs are you written? And he said, Jap Battle Rap. And so I told him what I do, and I told him I wanted to interview him, and I interviewed him. And what I found out this is what I remember from here, I wrote this down. His name is Zach Shermer.
Yeah.
He didn't grow up here in LA. His father's a rabbi, so he was a rabbi's kid, so he was totally like insider, Jewish. And he said the instructions that Rachel Bloom gave him was to Jew it up. And she said, full on Jew it up. And she said two things that she wanted in the Jap outright. One was they needed to flash social justice cards. There's a line in there earlier on where they both show their ACLU cards. And also mention Israel. And it had to be very, very positive Israel. What blew Zach away was he did this thinking he's going to have to do a ton of editing, and he had to do absolutely no edits. He took absolutely everything. So from his perspective, he just thought it was just unbelievable that he could go full on as hard as he wanted on these things, and they really accepted it. The other thing is, amongst many of the other things, Ray and I tied together to do a program with Toby Felcher, and I continue the relationship with her and see her from time to time. And I she's on Nobody Wants This, right? And she plays the role of the mother of the rabbi, but has that non-Jewish self-interest anyways. So I said to Toby, I said, I can't believe you're getting all these roles. And she said that she never really wanted to be candid as a Jewish actress. But she did this whole Goulda's balcony thing and really, got a lot of recognition for it. And then she just decided, so now she's typecast as a Jewish character, and she's just going to do it to the hilt. And she's just going to play it as hard as she can. And it's like, it works because that's what you need, with this. So again, the intertextuality inside or outside, I just really think this is so, because it's so insider, it's really interesting how it's accepted, and I'll talk more about this with my Naked Cats presentation tomorrow. Thanks.
Lovely. Thank you. No, it's very interesting. I'm mainly thinking, oh, that's all very interesting, and I want to talk to you about it properly later. Yeah.
So I do have a sort of a nobody rockers question. Are you familiar with So thinking about with the name of the conference, the Summit for Research Issues of Jewishness on screen now. I wonder is the extent that you is it mentions in these songs on your Spotify. So I'm completely for Rachel Bloom outside the context of this. Could you just talk a little bit about what works off screen and then what we're gaining from having such dramatic visual cues to these references in the show?
Yeah, so even for anyone who doesn't know, Rachel Bloom started before Crazy Ex-Girlfriend doing YouTube videos of musical parodies, very, very similar. I'm sure she had, again, apologize for my language. She has a song called Fuck Me Ray Bradbury, which she is dressed as a schoolgirl, very reminiscent of Britney, is it Toxic? No, Hit Me Baby One More Time, music video. Very, very similar. So visuals have always been very, in my opinion, very connected to her work. She always makes use of the visual alongside. And I would say this is just from an audience perspective rather than an academic necessarily, but as someone who has listened to it a lot, actually when I listen to it, I do visualize it as well. I think they come hand in hand. In preparation for this, I was watching Remember That We Suffered on YouTube, and I was just flicking through the comments because they're always interesting. And Crazy Ex-Girlfriend videos do get a lot of comments. They're always people always have stuff to say about it. And someone pointed out that when Patti LuPone is doing her big sort of long note, there was a big discussion of why she took a breath in the middle of the note. But someone pointed out that Tova Felcher is just sort of like doing this crazy dance behind her. I've seen the video multiple times, I've seen the show multiple times. I've never once noticed that. And so I think there's something in that repetition of watching and rewatching. And I think Crazy Ex-Girlfriend does have those repeat viewers. It has a really strong fan base that I think being able to watch it on YouTube, watch it within the context of the show, or listen to the cast recordings, all bring different elements, but allow that repetition of it. And also with the YouTube, I think Jack Battle is one of them. Some of the shows, because it was on CW, they had to do non-explicit versions for the actual TV show, and they made sure they recorded the explicit versions, both visually and audibly, and released those on YouTube. So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, can I just go for one? What the? Sorry, go. Yeah, we'll stop.
Yeah.